A Guide to Talking with Children About Grief and Loss by Gail Hunsberger. Children come in all shapes and sizes. Additionally, children develop at various rates depending on several factors, such as physical environment, cognitive development, physical development, cultural beliefs, and overall health. These are just a few to be considered. Every child will experience their first loss of a loved one. Everything grief related moving forward will link back to that first loss and the story they created about it. The story of loss may or may not be grounded in the actual events, but rather formed from the child's belief and interpretation of the events and the environment in which the experience occurred. As a parent, how is the best way to assist your child through this first loss experience? There are several paths which a parent can choose, and there's no right or wrong in the decision you make. One of the first steps a parent can take is to be prepared. Understanding grief as a natural reaction to the loss of someone or something important to you. Look back at your life experiences with grief. What does that first grief experience look like in your life now as a parent? Review what worked and what did not work for you. Was your grief complicated, prolonged, or was it a healthy experience? As parents, taking time to prepare also includes researching in advance of a loss. Questions to consider are what to do, say, versus what not to do or say. What is normal versus complex or prolonged grief? What separates grief from depression? What therapies are available for children? What resources are available for parents? Where do I learn more? So let's talk about the do's and don'ts of helping children with grief. One of the biggest don'ts is to put a time limit on grieving children. So now let's focus on the do's. We've already discussed tending to and acknowledging your own grief. But what's next? Be present. Just be present with your child. No cell phones, no TV, no distractions. Be fully present, showing up and be willing to not have all the answers. Next, meet your child where they are, meaning what do they already know about death? What story have they created around the death? Are they concrete thinkers? Do they have anticipatory grief? Next, be concrete. Be concrete in what you offer. Gifts to the child to help them cope may create a lifelong materialistic remembrance of the death experience. Not good or bad, it just may. Be prepared to follow through on promises and use concrete terminology death, dead, died versus passed on, since children can create different meanings to different words. Be honest. Be honest and open with them that nothing said or done will bring the person back. And finally, don't forget to keep using the person's name. The loved one's name is crucial to continuing bonds. So let's talk about the types of grief. The term normal or uncomplicated grief is comprised of a long list and broad range of feelings, cognitions, physical sensations, and behavioral changes from the child's normal. The shift comes when all these feelings, emotions, behaviors worsen or linger on. Although there is no quote timeline to grief, the average is 6 months for a child to be back to their baseline before the death. Complex or complicated grief have characteristics of feelings of yearning for the deceased, loneliness, intrusive memories or fantasies about the deceased. They suffer from insomnia. They avoid places or activities that remind the child of the deceased, and they tend to be angry. If complicated grief goes unrecognized, a child may develop prolonged grief. The characteristics of complicated grief intensify, and the child then may develop intense feelings of worthlessness, develop identity confusion, have unreasonable fears, global numbness, impaired function in normal activities, and they tend to overreact to minor issues. So, when does grief turn into depression? It's when a child now has a persistent focus on themselves. They have a feeling of worthlessness with no sense of purpose. They lack joy and pleasure. Their cognition is impaired. They're unable to focus or perform activities of daily living. Physically, they sleep more, they're fatigued, they're sick, and behavioral, they isolate from others, and they have suicidal thoughts, which they may act upon. So, what therapies are available? There's always the traditional therapy of meeting one on one with a counselor in their office. Families generally present together, and there are periods when the child may interact with a specially licensed pediatric therapist separate from their parents. Here are three of the hundreds of websites offering activities for children dealing with grief. Grief camps are also a wonderful opportunity for children to connect with other children who are also on a grief journey. Additionally, art therapy is also proving to be an effective way for children to express their emotions and feelings about grief and loss. Animal assisted interventions is an evolving form of grief therapy. All humans, regardless of age, will experience the loss of a loved one. This inevitable bond connects people of all religions, cultures, lifestyles, and personalities. An additional bond among humans is the love for animals. Animal assisted interventions bring an area of common ground among people. The level of these interventions is as vast as the ways in which grief can be experienced. Finding and developing on a human animal bond may aid to create a new normal in a shorter period of time and aid in creating a community in which healing continues to occur in a passive way. So, where can you learn more? There is an abundance of literature available at bookstores and your library. Internet searches for organizations near you, and don't forget about your pediatrician and local hospice organizations. To conclude this presentation, be open to the belief that grief is a journey of life.